Welcome to the Scruffy Nazarene podcast. I'm so glad you found your way here. If you haven't already, please go back and listen to our episode 1. It talks a little bit about who we are and the reasoning behind this podcast. If you've already listened to that episode, then please enjoy today's episode. Hey there, family. Welcome back to another episode of the Scruffy Nazarene podcast. I am so excited to have you here. A couple of housekeeping items real quick. Just want to start off and remind y'all, hey, we have an email address, right? We have a blog that's getting ready to go live hopefully soon. Mrs. Scruffy is working on some things for that. She's putting together the first set of posts and first what's the term I'm looking for? I'm not sure. Anyway, my wife is amazing. She is phenomenal. She is beautiful. She is talented. And anybody that knows me knows that I will go all day long just talking about how much I love her and how awesome she is. She puts up with me, guys. That being said, she's talented in many, many ways. And so she just wrote a vacation Bible school for the church that we're currently attending. And so I want to put that out there. That should be hitting our website, hopefully in the next little bit. But I'm going to plug that. And in true Nazarene fashion, it's all about being called to holiness. We'll discuss more about that later on. Last week's episode with Pastor Nick was a great episode. We had a great time talking about that particular topic. And I've got a few more interviews lined up for us with a few other pastors and close friends and who have just poured into me, who know quite a bit about what they're talking about, their topics that I've asked them to speak about. And they're currently praying for those topics. They're praying about what they're supposed to say and what that's supposed to look like. And we're working on logistics and schedules, but we are going to do a few more interview episodes as well. One of which is going to be over that topic, holiness. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that one with Pastor Daniel Bradshaw from our Madisonville church here in Kentucky. He is going to help me expand on what holiness and sanctification are and what that means for the Nazarene church. But that is not our topic for tonight. But I got off track. The big thing that I wanted to start off with, though, was our email address. It's info@scruffynaz.com. Okay, info@scruffynaz.com. And the reason that is so important is we know that there is so much going on in this world. There are so many things that the world's scary, right? There's so much going on. There's so many things, and not just the world, but there are things going on in our own lives, sickness or hurts or habits or loved ones who are lost, things that we have going on. And so all of this to say, if you want to have us pray with you over whatever's going on in your life, please. It doesn't get shared. It doesn't get sent to anybody. I'm not going to sell your information, but I want to pray with you. If you've got something happening, I want to pray with you. I want to be able to say, this is, I want to be able to come in agreement with you over the things that are happening in your life. I want to be able to just pray down heaven for you. If you've got a need, I want to go and get on my knees at the feet of the Father and lay myself on the altar, prostrate before him for you and with you. Because Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there so I am, or so there I am. And he says that where you would come into agreement, he will come into agreement with us also. And so there is power in prayer and there is power in praying together. This is what I'm getting at. There is power in prayer and there's power in us praying together. And so that's my plug for that. I want to be able to pray with you guys. So please, if you've got prayer requests or if you've got praises, right? Prayer is a conversation. And so God doesn't want us to just use him like a shopping list. God, please help us with this and do this and take care of this. He wants to do that, right? God loves us. He wants to take care of these things for us, but God wants to celebrate and rejoice with us too, right? So if we've got praises, we should bring those to God. If we want to say thank you, we should say thank you to God. And so if you've got something you want to rejoice, we want to rejoice with you here as well at Scruffy Nazarene. So, that's all that I have on that as far as housekeeping goes. I want to go ahead and jump into tonight's episode. I have wrestled with this one. Not gonna lie, guys. Because I've got, I've got a whole bunch of notes and everything. I had somewhere I was going tonight, and God said we're gonna change it up, and He's done that to me a couple of times in the pulpit. He's done that a couple of times to me whenever I was preaching sermons, and that's always a scary time for me because I am very much a planner. I am very much interested in making things go the way they're supposed to go, right? And so tonight, and we're still kind of in the same vein of where I was going to be, just kind of getting a little out of order. Next three podcasts, we're going to be talking about Elijah, the prophet Elijah, book of First Kings. Probably one of his more notable exploits was where he called on God and God dropped fire from heaven onto Mount Carmel. We're going to talk about that on the next episode. And then, again, plugging my good friend Pastor Nick, he actually preached a little bit of the passage of scripture that's a little bit after where we're going to be at tonight, this past Sunday, at the church, and we're actually going to talk about that one too, in 2 episodes. But tonight, I want us to look at the interlude between the place where God moved in a mighty giant way and the place where God spoke softly to Elijah, right? And that's what Pastor Nick preached about last week. And like I said, we're going to hit that in about 2 weeks, or 2 episodes rather. But I want to talk about that interlude. But before we get there, it is June 24th, 2025, and I'm not sure exactly where Blue Blazes is, but I'm pretty sure I live about 3 or 4 parallels south of there towards the equator, because it is hot here. It has been hot. It has been muggy. It has been miserable. It has been just a terrible experience the last couple of days. I mean, we complained about all the rain we were getting. It's done nothing but rain. Kind of thought that Noah was going to pull up my front yard and say, "Hey, hop on," and then it stopped raining and it just turned hot and miserable. And so, I say all that because, have you ever just had one of those really terrible bad days? Like those days that nothing went right, nothing did what it was supposed to, nothing. You probably couldn't have put your socks on right if you tried. One of those kinds of days, right? Well, that was not how my day started. My day started out good, right? I mean, my day started out. My day started out. I got up, went to work, did all the things that I normally do in the morning, and then got over to the first place where I had to do something. So, little background: if you don't know me personally, I work for a cell phone company. That's all I'm going to say on this. I'm not going to plug anybody, but we are constantly building things out, trying to make things better for customers, blah, 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 the whole spiel. And so I went to a new site that we're building and was trying to get that one ready to turn up to fill in kind of a gap that we've got somewhere. Things went as expected there. Things did what they were supposed to. I hooked up the equipment, got it ready for me to be able to do my thing for it later. Moved on to the next site. I got to the next site and it was like Murphy himself decided to show up. And if you're not familiar with Murphy's Law, my version of it may not be the exact version of it, but Murphy's Law is everything that can go wrong will go wrong. I think Murphy's Law is actually, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. But yeah, basically everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong with this one. And I spent 3 hours standing in the blazing sun in a black t-shirt, pair of jeans, pair of boots, 98-degree weather, about 110% humidity. I may or may not be exaggerating there. I haven't actually looked at the barometrics for that time, or at the weather, the barometer or the weather report, or the dew point, or the humidity levels, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a meteorologist. I haven't looked at that for that time period, but honestly, it felt like I was standing in about 99-degree heat with about 110% humidity. It got bad enough at one point. I'm pretty sure if I'd had a fishing pole, I could have fished in the puddle that was in my boots. It was that hot, and I was pouring that much sweat. And I was hot, and I was irritated, and nothing was going the way that I wanted to. The equipment wasn't working the way that it should have. And at that point, I was about ready just to take and, there was a bluff over there. I was about ready to take and just put my truck in neutral and shove everything off over the cliff. I was done. I was fed up. I couldn't see straight. And then I heard somebody say something to me. That's not me. And that's not you. I heard God stop me and say, that's not you, and that's not me. That just caught me off guard for a minute. And that didn't instantly end my bad mood, my frustrations, my angers. But it got me to thinking, how much of this bad day was stuff going wrong and Murphy's Law, and how much of it was being exacerbated by situations that I might be able to control if I stepped back and thought for a minute. So, and I promise we're going to get to Elijah and get to the scriptures here in just a minute, but I need y'all to hear this from me. So I load up my stuff. It's not going to work, right? I find out that I spend like 2 hours on the phone with tech support. It's not going to do what I needed to do, and so I load up and I drive to Lexington to pick up some equipment. And while I'm in Lexington, I get there, I pick up my equipment, turn around, head back to the place where I was at. And while I'm in Lexington, I look over and I see a Dairy Queen. I'm like, I haven't eaten hardly at all today. It's hot. It's nasty. It's terrible. And I got to thinking, all I had today was an energy drink, a Gatorade, a couple of chicken tenders from the gas station because I wanted some protein, and a protein shake. And then, a part of a bottle of water because I hadn't been drinking enough because I got out hot and working and frustrated and wasn't thinking, and realized I was hungry. And I've been, on a weight loss thing. I've been working to lose some weight. I've been trying to get healthier and be healthier. But at this point, I was just thinking about fuel to fill my body with, right? And so I pull in Dairy Queen, cheeseburger and fries, Coke Zero. Got to have something healthy in there, right? Um, and almost as soon as I popped a couple of those French fries in my mouth and they hit my stomach, it was like my whole demeanor changed. Suddenly, the day wasn't so bad. Suddenly, everything that happened, was kind of terrible, right? It was rough, but it wasn't the worst day ever. It wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was doable. It wasn't even the worst day of work I've had by far. I mean, come on. Yeah, I've been out in the sun and everything, and it's not great, but I had a truck that had air conditioning that was working. I had a nice giant liter bottle of water in there that was cold. It stayed cold because of sitting in the air conditioned truck. I had friends who would listen while I vented. I had a wife who loved me and actually had supper waiting for me at home, even though I was eating at that moment. I knew she was cooking supper. I had 3 kids who loved me, and not tonight, won't be able to play tonight, but they want to play video games with me later. I catch them in it this week. Things weren't so bad. I had cooled off, kind of dried out a little bit, poured the sweat out of my boots. Life wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Life wasn't that terrible. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves, right? The scripture for tonight, or for this episode tonight, whatever. I'm filming this at I'm not filming. I'm recording this at 10 o'clock Central Time, just because I've only been home about an hour and a half. Been a long day at work, but the episode tonight, our scripture is 1 Kings chapter 19, and it's verses 1 through 8. Before I read this scripture, I want to preface this by saying, again, the next episode is going to talk about the chapter before, so we're kind of getting out of whack. But in the chapter before, Elijah had just been at the mountaintop. He had successfully shown all of Israel who God was, right? He had done the thing with the fire on the mountain, not to ruin our no spoilers for next week plus, but he had just done all that, and then to follow God's commands and help cleanse Israel of the sin that it was living in, he puts all of the prophets of Baal to death. So that's where we find ourselves in 1 Kings chapter 19 verses 1. This has happened. And then now Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me and even more if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time." And he was afraid and arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die and said, "It is enough now, O Lord. Take my life, for I am not better than my fathers." I'm going to stop right there at the end of verse 4. Elijah was in a dark place. Elijah was in a terrible place, right? He had just ridden that high, come down. He was on top of that mountain, physically, literally, and spiritually, right? He had, God had shown up and shown out and done what he had said he would do, and he he had proved to Israel that God was who he said he was, that God was real and God was alive, and that the false gods were not there. They were fake. They were a joke. And then but then nothing changed, right? Nothing changed. King Ahab was still there. He was still married to Queen Jezebel, who was a Baal worshiper. Ahab was a weak man who allowed Jezebel to essentially run him and the country, and spiritually just destroyed Israel by bringing in Baal worship. And so God had done all these great things at the top of Mount Carmel, and nothing changed. Elijah had been through this, and finally he gets there and he says, you know what, God, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm burnt out. I have no strength left. Elijah was struggling with depression and burnout, something that is very real and alive and happens to each and every one of us, right? Myself included. I don't hide it, but I haven't talked openly, at least not on this platform, about my journey with therapy. But in October of last year, 2024, October of 2024, I was in one of the lowest places that I can ever remember being. I was burnt out. I was depressed. I felt so far from God that it felt like, you know how some people talk about they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I had dug through the bottom of the barrel, kept on digging. And then somebody at some point had decided to block up and mortar the top of that hole, cover it with cement, and then set the barrel back on top of it. That's how far I felt from God. That's how separated I felt. I felt far from God. I felt isolated and separated from my wife, from my kids, from my friends, from my family. I was so burnt out that if there was a physical representation of me of how burnt I was, it had been a charcoal briquette, guys. It was bad. I couldn't find joy. I couldn't find peace. I couldn't find contentment. And I just wanted to quit. Not like physically life, right? Because that's not something that you can do, right? If you're don't get me wrong, it's out there, it's a thing, but it's not an option if you're a husband and a father. You've got people that depend on you. You can't let them down. That's what was in my mind. It's not that, it wasn't an option, it was just not an option. But I felt so far removed from God and everybody else because I was so burnt out. I was so depressed. I couldn't tell you which way was up. And so I met a man, my therapist. I met my therapist, and he helped me understand that the real root cause of what was happening was that I was so burnt out because I was always so busy taking care of everyone else that I didn't stop to take care of me. I was so busy being a good son to my elderly parents. I was so busy being a good sibling to my brothers and sisters. I was so busy being a good husband to my wife and a good father to my children and a good volunteer at church and a good pastor to the people who needed me to be their pastor and a good student for classes and a good employee at work. And I was so busy being what everybody else needed me to be that I wasn't taking the time that I needed for myself to rest. And that's where Elijah has found himself. He has done and done and done everything that God has told him to do. And now he's tired. He's burnt out. He's depressed. He's give up. He's done. Then then it picks up in verse 5 and it says, "But he lay down and he slept under a juniper tree. And behold, there was an angel who touched him, and he said to him, Arise and eat. And then he looked, and behold, there was at his head a bread cake that was baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And then the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God." So Elijah laid down and took a nap. You hear that, right? You hear that as a almost as a joke, but he took a nap and had a snack. I've heard so many people say that, but that's not what that was. That was Elijah getting rest. That was Elijah taking care of his basic needs, strengthening himself, realigning himself with God, doing the things that he needed to do to take care of himself so that he could take care of Israel the way God wanted him to do. You know, Genesis chapter 2, right? God, he goes he does all these miraculous things at the beginning of the book of Genesis, right? You know, Genesis 1:1, the earth was formless and without void, and the Spirit of the Lord floated above the surface of the waters. And then God spoke into the darkness and said, Let there be light. And there was. And there was light, and there was darkness, and sun and moon and stars, and waters separated out, and land, and plants, and birds, and fish, and animals, and mankind. 6 days God worked. In Genesis 2:1, it says, Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts. By the seventh day God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. God rested. Exodus 20, starting in verse 8. You'll remember this is one of the 10 Commandments. It says, Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he made it holy. Lastly, I want to read you one more verse. Mark chapter 2. And you know what? We're going to read all the way through from verses 23 through 27. It says, And it happened that he was passing through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples began to make their way along while picking the heads of grain. The Pharisees were saying to him, Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, Have you never read what David did when he was in need, and he and his companions became hungry? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for anyone to eat except the priests. And he also gave it to those who were with him. Jesus said to them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. And so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. But my focus right there is verse 27. It says, Jesus said to them, The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a tool and a weapon in our arsenal that God gave us to combat the things of the enemy. I want you to hear that. So I'm going to say it again one more time, a little bit louder for the people sitting in the back. The Sabbath is a tool and a weapon that was given to us to fight the things of the enemy that he throws against us. The Sabbath is not about us keeping some high religious thought process or anything like that. God gave us the Sabbath to rest. God gave us rest as a tool and a weapon to combat the enemy, to combat the things that he likes to destroy us with, the tiredness, the anger, the depression, the anxieties. Rest, the ability to stop, to focus ourselves, to center ourselves, the ability to get away from all of the things that are driving us nuts, that are keeping us from being able to get close to God. All of these things that are tearing us apart. Resting and caring for ourselves is how we combat that. You see, while I do serve at the church that we are at now, I don't do all the things that I used to do. My wife and I, when we first started attending this church, when we first started attending Glens Fork, where we're at with Nick, Pastor Nick, the first thing he said to me was, I want you guys to rest while you're here. Because he knows how my wife and I are wired. We would have left the last church that we were at and jumped right into serving right there in Glens Fork, doing everything that we could. Because that's who we are and that's how we're wired, and he is wired the same way. And he said, that's not what I want you to do. You can serve when you're ready, but for now, I want you to rest. Because when I am burnt out, I'm no good. I can't pour from an empty cup, right? I've not been filling myself up. I've not been diving into God. I felt alone and separated from God. I felt distant from him and distant from the church and distant from his word. My prayer life was in shambles. My study life was in shambles. And so the best gift, or one of the best gifts, I won't say the best, but one of the best gifts that anybody has ever given me was when Pastor Nick, looked at me and said, you're here to rest. You don't get to help me with anything until I think you're ready. And so through a series of conversations we had later on, eventually it came to a point where my wife and I, we were ready to serve and we were ready to get back on and help and do things. And I love him for that. I love him for taking care of mine and my wife's physical and spiritual healths, our mental healths, our emotional healths, because we were not necessarily in a place where we could do that for ourselves. We would have just kept putting one foot in front of the other, doing and doing and doing. And that is not what God has ordained for people. God ordained for us to be able to rest, to rejuvenate ourselves, to strengthen ourselves, to find a place where we can center ourselves and find peace and joy and contentment and get our strength back so that we can stand up and go back on the journey that he's called us for. just like Elijah. My wife and I, we were burnt out and we needed to rest. I needed to rest. So now here comes my question to you. Here comes the part where I'm going to ask you to put your money where your mouth is. Are you resting? And I'm not talking about, yeah, I go to church every Sunday and I'm doing all the things and doing all this. And no, are you resting? Are you taking time to take care of yourself? This was a hard lesson for me to learn. And it took good friends and it took a lot of work with my therapist to get me to a point where I could say, I'm not resting like I should. I'm not doing the things that I need to do for myself. Are you doing the things that you enjoy? Are you sitting there and playing video games if that's your thing? Are you getting out and going fishing if that's your thing? Hiking, camping, going for a run, go shoot some pool, read a book that's not tied to work or church or whatever, unless that's, something that you love to do. Are you taking a class to refresh yourself? Do you sew or crochet? Do you draw? Do you paint? Do you work with wood? Do you do little projects? Big projects, whatever. Are you doing what you need to do to refill your cup? To find, and I've used this phrase a couple of times, and I picked it up from the man who's been helping me, from my therapist. Are you finding your peace, joy, and contentment in life? Are you doing the things that help you find that? Because when you realize that you've lost those things, and you realize that you need to start resting and taking care of yourself, I'll tell you right now, that's when the wilderness and the dryness and the distance from God start to end. I'm speaking from experience. I've been there. The time when I realized that, I feel far from God, but it's because I'm so exhausted in every way imaginable. And I'm not effective like this. I'm no good to the kingdom. I'm no good to my wife or my kids. I'm no good to my job like this. I'm putting one foot in front of the other because that's all I know how to do at this point. And so I had to figure out what the things were that I needed to do to get back to me. And so I had to learn how to rest. And it's not always easy, right? We do the same things all the time, so many times, for so long that we forget how to do anything else. And I'm sorry if this is running a little long tonight, but, I think there is somebody out there that really needs to hear this. So I'm going to say it one more time, and then I'm going to let you go. Rest and the Sabbath were given to us by God so that we can rejuvenate ourselves and maintain our effectiveness in His kingdom. Apart from Him, we can do nothing. But if we don't allow ourselves to take full advantage of the tools that he gives us, of the gifts that he gives us, of the rest that he gives us, then we get to a place where we're just going through the motions. I want you to find where your rest is and take it. I love you, family, and I'm praying for you. We'll pick up next episode and with the story of Elijah at Mount Carmel. So there's your foreshadowing or your teaser. We're going to talk about Elijah at Mount Carmel on our next episode. So again, I love you and I'm praying for you. This is the Scruffy Nazarene signing off.